This is CNN Breaking News.
Welcome to The Lead. I'm Jake Tapper. We begin with breaking news on this Friday the 13th. At the same time, President Trump is beating back charges from fired FBI Director James Comey's devastating tell-all book. The Justice Department disclosed this afternoon that the president's personal attorney, Michael Cohen, is under criminal investigation. This was revealed in court in response to Cohen's motion to restrain the evidence collected in Monday's raids on his residence, hotel room, office, safety deposit boxes, and electronic devices. The Cohen hearing is due to resume any minute. Earlier today, the government asserted that any communications between President Trump and Cohen concerning the payment to adult film actress Stormy Daniels, that those conversations are not covered by attorney-client privilege. The government cited President Trump's own words, said on Air Force One on April 5th, in which President Trump claimed to know absolutely nothing about the payment.
Did you know about the $130,000 payment to Stormy Daniels? Then why did Michael Cohen make this if there was no truth or allegation?
Well, you have to ask Michael Cohen. Michael's my attorney, and you'll have to ask Michael.
Do you know where he got the money to make that payment?
No, I don't know.
Let's go right to CNN's Shimon Prokupecz in New York. Shimon, we're hearing that Michael Cohen is not cooperating. What are prosecutors saying?
Well, that's right, Jake. None of what the prosecutors here today are saying is any good for the president, certainly not good for his personal attorney, Michael Cohen. And what they've revealed is that he is under investigation, under criminal investigation. And they have basically been investigating him for quite some time, it appears, including conducting covert surveillance on him, where they were able to obtain some emails that showed he had basically not been doing any kind of legal work. They also explained the reason, perhaps, as to why they needed to go in so aggressively with a search warrant was because they were concerned that he was going to destroy evidence, that evidence was going to be destroyed that they would not be able to otherwise have access to. So that's why they went in the way they went in. We've also learned here in court that the defense here, his attorneys, Michael Cohen's attorneys, the judge has asked them to provide a list of who his other clients are. And so far, they have not been able to do so. And that's why we're supposed to be back in court now, because the judge is basically asking Michael Cohen, who are your other clients besides the president? And so far, the attorneys have not been able to answer that.
All right, Shimon Prokupecz, thank you so much. Let's bring in my panel. And first of all, let's just get quick reactions off the bat. Michael Cohen under criminal investigation and acknowledgement from the Justice Department. Your response?
Quick response. Look, the president's been making this about one spider. That's Robert Mueller. As we move along and we see a series of indictments in two separate investigations, indictments of Flynn, indictments of Papadopoulos, Paul Manafort, of Gates, some of whom are cooperating, the number of interviewees who are giving the Mueller team a picture, the number of emails. In this case, we're hearing that Michael Cohen has voicemails evidently he recorded. Over time, it's not going to be the spider of Robert Mueller. When this goes public, there's going to be a spider web of information about people associated with the president who are speaking themselves. I think that's what the American people will see eventually.
And Laura, we know he's under a criminal investigation, Michael Cohen. The filing redacts what crimes he's being investigated for. Based on your experience as a prosecutor and what we know, what do you think? Do you think it could simply be a federal election law?
No, I think it's far more than that. And first of all, we're far past the arguments we made just a week and a half ago about target versus subject, the semantic-based arguments. Now you see what it looks like when you are in a full-throated investigation and you actually have a target. And the idea here is the redactions. They're not wanting to tip their hand to the rest of the public. There are probably people out there who we do not yet know are going to be witnesses, may be cooperating in testimony, may actually be subjects or targets eventually in this case. They're not going to show their hands, much like they did in the George Vanderswine sentencing hearing when they redacted a great deal of information to say, we're not going to show everything here, and the court's allowing them to do so, which gives further credence to the idea that this is an independent judge who is assessing this case, not perhaps as a witch hunt, but as saying there's far more to this issue than certainly a campaign finance violation.
And Phil, we know the search warrants covered his emails, hotel, his office, his safety deposit boxes, electronic devices. We also know that Cohen recorded conversations What are you looking for to drop next in terms of information about this investigation?
Who else is going to be implicated in this who is associated with Cohen and is concerned about being involved in a criminal investigation and starts to talk? They're saying that Cohen isn't cooperating now. Let's see what happens here. When he sees the extent of the criminal charges, he may step back and say, I got a family. The president just put me in front of a truck. I'm going to start talking. I'm interested in seeing who else is implicated and whether they start talking.
And Cohen's not cooperating. As Shimon reported, the government did this raid, they say, because they're concerned he was going to delete his records. What does that say to you?
That says to me that they do not trust that he has ever been forthcoming or that he would have been in the future, and that there was an urgent need for them to execute it in this way. A no-knock announcement warrant was going to be one thing, which happened in, of course, the Manafort case. This is telling you that of all the electronic data, of all the different telephones people have been referencing and computers, et cetera, that this is somebody who had never had any intention of cooperating, and a judge believed that. And remember, the most important thing to think of here is everyone's talking about attorney-client. They need to have proof that he was actually his attorney in all respects. And so if that was never the case, if the court never had to respect the attorney-client privilege, the idea of having an urgent need to go in before anything was destroyed becomes all the more paramount.
And Phil, just to that point, the filing says, quote, Cohen is in fact performing little to no legal work, and that 0 emails were exchanged with President Trump. If they are trying to make the argument, the legal argument, that Cohen is not his lawyer, Cohen is his fixer, does that mean that the attorney-client privilege won't hold anymore?
Well, that's not the only problem here. As you've seen over the past hour or two, people are talking about the fact, and I think it's in the filing, that the president came out, as you saw on Air Force One, and said, hey, I don't know anything about this payment. How can there be a relationship with your client, in this case Donald Trump, about a payment when the president says he didn't know about the payment? So, one, you have somebody who's not doing legal work. Two, you have somebody who is apparently not communicating with the president about the case. How can you claim privileged conversations when there weren't any conversations and they weren't legal in nature?
What they are communicating about, actually, let me bring in some breaking news just in this second. The New York Times reporting that President Trump called Michael Cohen today to check in, and we just learned that from the New York Times. So there has been at least some communication if President Trump called Michael Cohen. You don't think, do I take it, Laura, that attorney-client privilege applies here?
It never applied to every single communication. I mean, I'm an attorney. You and I are talking. It was not about legal advice. We don't have a privilege that shields our entire thing from being disclosed to everyone else. You actually have to have an attorney-client relationship, meaning when we communicate, it's exclusively between you and I as attorney-client. The subject matter is in furtherance of legal advice, not business, not Ray Donovan-esque fixing, not discussions about taxi medallions or whatever they talked about. It has to be that. But the interesting thing about here is, Jake, is that the contract claim that is before Michael Avenatti and Stormy Daniels about whether he knew about it or not would not be as impacted by the discussion of the president on Air Force One saying, I didn't know anything about it. They could still have a claim about third-party beneficiary relationships. But it's key here in the New York investigation as to whether all this information can be categorically called privileged. And that was never going to be the case.
Does the fact that the president and talked to Michael Cohen today, called Michael Cohen today, does that complicate this at all?
Well, it's very nice of him and special to check in. Maybe he gave him a snack at some point later on. But it doesn't change or help his case to say that we actually have an attorney-client relationship. You have to go back in time to retroactively say, I want to have us have this conversation. And remember, a lot has been made about these audio recordings. Well, if there was an audio recording, which in New York you can do by the one-party consent, one of us had to agree to have it recorded. Other one didn't have to know. But remember, those conversations as well had to be privileged for him to say it has to be protected. And if somebody else is involved, none of it passes muster.
And it does matter if Michael Cohen is or was his attorney. The White House was asked this question today, just a few minutes ago. Take a listen to White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders on the very basic question, is Michael Cohen still President Trump's attorney?
I know that the president has worked with him as a personal attorney. Beyond that, I don't have anything else to add about the
these developments.
I mean, how could there not be an answer to that question? It seems pretty basic.
Well, I mean, let me answer it for you. Let me play Sarah Sanders. How can you remain the personal lawyer for the President of the United States when you're under a criminal investigation that involves the President of the United States? Laura can answer this better than I, but I cannot imagine that over the course of the next few days, somebody's going to answer the question of the White House and say, yeah, this guy still represents us in a case where he is actually under criminal investigation. How do you have a privileged conversation with him?
You know, how else you can't know that? Because Trump's lawyer walked into the courtroom today, and it wasn't Michael Cohen when he actually argued on behalf of the privilege that belonged to the President of the United States and why he didn't want any information disclosed. If you didn't have a further indication then of who was taking sides, who was the attorney, Michael Cohen wasn't the one saying, I am the president's lawyer.
How much do you think that this is? Now, this case is being run by the Southern District of New York, the U.S. Attorney's Office there, not by Robert Mueller and the Russia investigation. But how much do you think that this might be rooted in addition to whatever crimes they think that Michael Cohen may have committed, trying to get him to flip as part of this larger Mueller investigation?
I think zero.
Zero. You don't think it has anything to do with it?
I do not. I think there's one issue that might come up, and that is money, whether money that the investigators find in this case that relates to what Mueller finds. There'll be what's called a taint team, a clean team that looks at the information for Cohen to weed out stuff that's not relevant to the case. They hand it over to separate investigators. If those investigators for New York see something relevant to Mueller, they push it back. But I know Mueller. What he said was, this isn't relevant to my case, to Russia, et cetera. Hand it over to the Department of Justice. They said this is interesting. Get New York to investigate. I don't think this is related to some sort of weird Hollywood sort of conspiracy that says we want Cohen to flip.
And yet, at the same time, Cohen has, as his client, as far as we know, only one client, Donald Trump. So if he committed crimes in the service of his client, there are going to be at least questions for the president from the Southern District of New York.
Of course. I mean, ethically speaking, you're going to have questions about to what extent Michael Cohen involved or implicated or attempted to implicate the president. He's taken a 10-foot pole approach to Michael Cohen, as you saw in Air Force One, to say, I don't know what he does. He's kind of doing his own thing. I don't want to be asked about it. Ask Michael Cohen. And when the courts then ask Michael Cohen, it'll be interesting to see what he says. But on your point, Phil, about the idea of it being totally separate, I'm not so sure I can have that certainty. What I do see is that any attempt to get Michael Cohen, based on his conversations, to cooperate or flip would be an exercise in futility, given his allegiances and his discussions. Also, remember what happened today with Scooter Libby. We already know the president has pardoning powers. If they're talking on the phone today, maybe that pillow talk involved the future as well.
Some people are wondering and speculating today, Phil, if the president's pardon of Scooter Libby, and we'll get into that later in the show, but if that was a signal of any sort to people, hey, I'm willing to use my pardon power.
Oh, heck yes. There's two pieces going on in parallel. Number one, undermine the investigation itself. So if there are ever indictments, you say, I told you all along, it's a witch hunt. If those indictments move along, the second shoe dropped today. Hey, if you're accused of lying in what I view as the president as a false investigation, I'll pardon you. I think the two go together.
All right, everyone, stick around. We have a lot more to talk about, more breaking news. The White House just responded to former FBI Director James Comey's bombshell tell-all book. You thought calling Comey a slime ball was bad. Wait until you hear the names that were just used at the White House podium. Stay with us.
The right sheets can take your sleep and your style to the next level. With Boll & Branch, the upgrade has never been more affordable. Every set is crafted from 100% organic cotton. They get softer and softer over time. That's why they have thousands of 5-star reviews, and even 3 U.S. presidents have Boll & Branch sheets. Try them for 30 nights, and if you don't love them, send them back for a full refund. Go to bollandbranch.com today for $50 off your first set of sheets, plus free U.S. shipping with promo code CNN2. Spelled B-O-L-L and branch.com. That's bollandbranch.com, promo code CNN2.
And we're back with even more breaking news. President Trump on a Twitter tirade moments ago slamming Andrew McCabe, the recently fired FBI deputy director. Quote, Department of Justice just issued the McCabe report, which is a total disaster. He lied, all caps. McCabe was totally controlled by Comey. McCabe is Comey. No collusion, all made up by this den of thieves and lowlifes, unquote. That is an actual quote by the president, an actual tweet. I was word for word. I didn't make any of that up. And right before that, the White House went all in, attacking McCabe's former boss, fired FBI Director James Comey, and his new bombshell book.
One of the president's greatest achievements will go down as firing Director James Comey.
Interestingly enough, Steve Bannon called it one of the biggest political mistakes in modern history. Let's bring in CNN's Pamela Brown at the White House. And Pamela, the president clearly setting the tone this morning, calling Comey a, quote, leaker and a liar. He called him an untruthful slime ball. Again, that's a quote. The White House is not letting up on this character attack against Comey.
Absolutely not. And after staying quiet last night, Jake, today, the White House has launched a full-throated attack on fired FBI Director James Comey as explosive passages from his forthcoming tell-all book hit the media. The president, as you pointed out, lashed out on Twitter this morning, calling him a proven liar and a leaker, saying that he leaked classified information. The president there referring to the 4 memos that Comey told Congress he gave to a friend about his interactions with the president. That was then passed on to New York Times reporter. Comey has maintained there was no classified information in that. But today at the press briefing, Press Secretary Sarah Sanders came out really doubling down on the criticism of Comey, echoing what we heard from the president. Here's what she said.
The American people see right through the blatant lies of a self-admitted leaker. This is nothing more than a poorly executed PR stunt by Comey to desperately rehabilitate his tattered reputation and enrich his own bank account by peddling a book that belongs in the bargain bin of the fiction section instead of being remembered as a dedicated servant in the pursuit of justice. Like so many of his other colleagues at the FBI, Comey will be forever known as a disgraced partisan hack that broke his sacred trust with the President of the United States.
And when Sanders was asked by a reporter if Trump was concerned by what's in Comey's book, she said not at all. But based on the president's tweets this morning, it's clearly top of mind for him. Jake?
Looks like President Trump's going to produce another bestseller. Comey's publisher is banking on his book, A Higher Loyalty, being a bestseller. It's printing 850,000 copies to meet pre-order demands. In contrast, Michael Wolff's book, Fire and Fury, had an initial run of only 150,000 copies, despite selling quite well. Comey describing jaw-dropping encounters with the president. CNN's Sarah Murray now joins me. And Sarah, Comey is giving his critics fodder for pushback.
Well, that's right. And look, this is a book that is packed with some substantive criticisms and also some pettier swipes at the president, including over his appearance. And as Comey is preparing to tell all, you can see the White House is casting the former FBI director as little more than a disgruntled employee.
I started to tell him about the allegation was that he had been involved with prostitutes in a hotel in Moscow in 2013 during a visit for the Miss Universe pageant, and that the Russians had filmed the episode. And he interrupted very defensively and started talking about it. You know, do I look like a guy who needs hookers?
The president says he's going to ousted FBI Director James Comey assailing President Donald Trump's leadership style as he describes a newly elected world leader more preoccupied with the salacious allegations against him than a hostile foreign government meddling in America's election. When President-elect Trump was briefed by intelligence chiefs on Russia's election interference in January 2017, Comey says this was Trump's top concern.
President-elect Trump's first question was to confirm that it had no impact on the election. And then the conversation, to my surprise, moved into a PR conversation. No one, to my recollection, asked, so what's coming next from the Russians? How might we stop it?
Comey's comments come as he kicks off a TV blitz to promote his new book, A Higher Loyalty, which casts Trump as an unethical narcissist who runs the White House like a mafia boss. The president unleashing on the FBI director he fired in May 2017. Tweeting, James Comey is a proven leaker and liar. He leaked classified information for which he should be prosecuted. He lied to Congress under oath. He is a weak and untruthful slimeball who was, as time has proven, a terrible director of the FBI. Trump adding, it was my great honor to fire James Comey. By Comey's telling, Trump couldn't get over the unsubstantiated claims in the now infamous dossier, namely that he invited Russian prostitutes to his Moscow suite and watched them pee on one another.
Says he may want me to investigate it to prove that it didn't happen. And then he says something that distracted me, because he said, you know, if there's even a 1% chance my wife thinks that's true, that's terrible. And I remember thinking, how could your wife think there's a 1% chance you were with prostitutes peeing on each other in Moscow? Honestly, never thought these words would come out of my mouth, but I don't know whether the current president of the United States was with prostitutes peeing on each other in Moscow in 2013. It's possible, but I don't know.
Now, Comey has proven to be a divisive figure among Democrats as well as Republicans, and this is just the beginning of this publicity tour. Jake?
Yeah, the book hasn't even dropped yet. Sarah Murray, thank you so much. My political panel is here with me. Kirsten, so let me start with you. Just to underscore this. The former FBI director says, quote, I don't know whether the current president of the United States was with prostitutes, et cetera, et cetera. That claim alone from a former FBI director for any other president at any other time would be devastating, and
it's not.
Yet here we are.
Yes. Well, I think that the conversation has moved into places that we never thought it would go so many different times. I've actually sat on the set with you, and so many things have happened. I think I was here when the Access Hollywood tape broke, in fact. So the things that were said in that tape weren't the types of things I thought I'd be discussing on television.
Sexual assault.
Or with anybody, frankly. Well, grabbing them by the pee and so forth.
Yeah.
But I think that, that should just, on a substantive point, mean something, because we can assume that that it was looked into and they made some sort of judgment about this dossier, and a lot of people have sort of said this doesn't, this is completely illegitimate, when in fact Comey's not willing to say it's completely illegitimate, even the most salacious claims in the dossier.
What do you think, Kristen, just as a matter of Comey deciding what to include in this book, what to talk about, what do you think about his decisions to really just say everything he feels, everything he thinks, talk about, when we broke the story of the existence of the dossier that President Trump had been briefed, and we did not mention any of the contents of the dossier, CNN. But there's the FBI director talking about prostitutes peeing on each other in Moscow.
Well, and what I think is kind of irresponsible about what he's doing in that interview is there is not evidence that occurred. And instead of saying there's no evidence that occurred, it's this sly, well, I don't know if it's true. And I think what Comey had an opportunity to do with this book was tell the world and persuade people who might not know how they feel about this and think the swamp just seems like it's pretty swampy and it doesn't like Donald Trump, to persuade them that there are really problems here and that there are important norms about law and justice that are being eroded. Or you can write a book that's kind of salacious and that sells a ton of copies and provokes the president so that he tweets and helps you sell another 100,000 copies. But I don't think actually makes the case that Jim Comey is a man of integrity. And I think that's disappointing, because I think people who have worked with Jim Comey, people on the Hill, will frequently say, this is a good man. And yet I think there are things in this book that, as were described as petty, that I think undercut that.
Robbie, I want to get your reaction to Comey trying to explain why he went public about reopening the Hillary Clinton investigation 10 or 11 days before the election, writing, quote, it is entirely possible that because I was making decisions in an environment where Hillary Clinton was sure to be the next president, my concern about making her an illegitimate president by concealing the restarted investigation bore greater weight than it would have if the election appeared closer or if Donald Trump were ahead in the polls. But I don't know. He's basically saying that he did what he did because he thought she was going to win, and he didn't want to be accused later on of hiding anything to protect the next president.
Yeah. Well, first of all, this is really complicated, okay? So I don't think James Comey is lying in this book. I think he's saying important things that we need to pay attention to about President Trump. So I want to acknowledge that it's important, and I'm glad he's coming forward with the truth. But, however, he writes a lot in this book about leadership. And I think good leaders admit when they made a mistake. And a lot of mistakes were made in this election because people thought Hillary Clinton was going to win. I made decisions at times because I thought she was going to win. Other people made decisions. And this is an example where he made a mistake. The justice system should not be changing the way it behaves or making choices about what it does based on the New York Times election needle. And that's what he did. I mean, I'm glad he's admitting that in this book. But I hope, actually, to your point, I hope he uses this book tour to help us learn from what happened and do better in the future. I hope he doesn't just use this book tour to talk about the things we were just talking about.
Everyone stick around. We got a lot more to talk about this book and more. The breaking news from the White House that could be a message to Paul Manafort and Michael Flynn and Michael Cohen. Stay with us.
Hey, it's Howard Beck, and I've got Ray Allen on Bleacher Report's The Full 48.
If a team could make me an offer that I couldn't refuse at that point, once 2015 came and in 2016, it was like there's nothing really that enticed me that would make me say, I'm going to get off the couch and I'm going to really consider this opportunity, because my kids were much more important.
So check out The Full 48 now on the Bleacher Report app or subscribe at Apple Podcasts.
And we're back with our politics lead, President Trump attacking James Comey in his new book, calling the ex-FBI director a, quote, proven leaker and liar and untruthful slimeball, and saying it was his, quote, great honor to fire James Comey. The Republican National Committee is also waging an anti-Comey campaign, branding him as an opportunistic individual, someone that Democrats railed against, which is true. Joining me now is the chair of the Republican National Committee, Ronna McDaniel. Thank you so much for joining us, Ronna. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me, Jake.
So, some breaking news. Minutes ago, you accepted the resignation of Elliot Broidy, the deputy finance chair of the RNC, after the Wall Street Journal broke the news that a different deputy finance director of the RNC, Michael Cohen, also President Trump's personal lawyer, negotiated a $1.6 million payout to a Playboy model that Broidy impregnated while married. Cohen, we learned from the Justice Department this afternoon, is also under criminal investigation. This on top of the fact that your former finance chair, Steve Wynn, is being accused this year of sexual harassment and assault. And I guess my first question for you is, what the heck is going on at the RNC?
Well, obviously, these developments are new to me. I had not heard of any of this. Elliot and I spoke earlier today. He tendered his resignation. He doesn't want to be a distraction to helping us elect Republicans and keeping the president's agenda moving forward. And at the RNC, we've raised double the money of the DNC. We have the best ground game we've ever put in place. We are prepared for these midterms, and that's what I'm laser focused on, is keeping these majorities so we can continue to work on behalf of the American people.
Is Michael Cohen still a deputy chair of the Finance Committee there, given the fact that he's under criminal investigation?
Yeah, I'm going to take a look. I haven't had a chance to do my due diligence as this news has been breaking. I've been hearing it mostly from the news. I want to have a chance to look at it, talk to Michael. Obviously, he hasn't been charged with anything. Due process is a cornerstone of our judicial system. But give me that time to look at the charges or the investigation and have a chance to talk to Michael.
So you're here today to talk about the website going after James Comey, questioning his ethics and integrity. And I have to just ask, can you understand somebody watching right now might look at anyone from the RNC today, given Broidy and Cohen and Wynn, and say, on what grounds can the RNC question anyone else's integrity?
Well, the Republican Party, the elected leaders of the Republican Party, is the party that passed a massive tax cut that's helped the middle class in this country, that has increased wages across this country. 2/3 of Americans have bigger paychecks, 3 million jobs. ISIS is on the run. That's why you talk about the Republican Party. What is the policy that we're putting in place for the American people? When I go to grocery stores and when I talk to people about this party in this country, they're worried about what are Republicans putting in place that's going to make my life better. And so far, our record is pretty darn good.
So that's the Republican Party. That's the President Trump, and that's Republicans on the House and Senate. But I'm specifically asking about the committee that you chair, the RNC, that has a website up now called LionComey.com, attacking a former director of the FBI, assailing his character. And, you know, you just accepted the resignation of a deputy finance chair because a different deputy finance chair negotiated a deal with a woman, a Playboy model, not his wife, that he had impregnated. You got the Steve Wynn situation. And my question is, the RNC is questioning the integrity of James Comey. Whatever issues there are with James Comey, what is the deal with Broidy and Cohen and Wynn? And how does that give you any moral ground to question anyone's integrity?
Well, James Comey discredited himself, and this isn't the RNC making up things about James Comey. James Comey has done that all on his own with his testimony before Congress, where he said he didn't leak, and then he did reveal that he gave his memos to a friend to give to a reporter, with the way he handled the Clinton investigation, now revealing in his book that he used polls to determine his decision to reveal to the public that he was reopening the Clinton investigation. Our job at the RNC is to make sure that we're highlighting for the American people this person that's going to get news coverage, air-to-air, 24-hour news coverage, that we need to present the real James Comey, and that they have an idea of the person who's presenting one version of events.
So the website is called LionComey.com, and obviously it suggests that the RNC cares a great deal about the truth. I know you did it in conjunction with the White House. They also seem to be very concerned about the truth when it comes to what comes out of James Comey's mouth. The Washington Post reported that President Trump has made more than 2,400 false or misleading claims since inauguration. Now, I know you're head of the RNC. You're not inclined to criticize the president, but this is a man who has said, falsely, thousands of Muslims were on TV cheering in New Jersey on 9/11, that Ted Cruz's father was involved in the Kennedy assassination, that President Obama was not born in this country, that 3 to 5 million people voted illegally in the 2016 election, that he had the largest inauguration crowd ever, and that vaccines cause autism. That's just a small little sampling. They're all patently false claims. So Why the double standard? Why do you care about James Comey telling the truth but not President Trump?
Well, the media has an obsession with covering President Trump, and they have
cover the president. Yes,
but they have covered him nonstop in probably the most negative way that we've seen for any president. But we know that they're going to bring James Comey on, and we don't think he's going to get the proper vetting. That's something that we want to make sure that the facts get out. If you go to our website, lyingcomey.com, you're going to see that most of the criticism comes from Democrats. That many of the criticisms we put forward are not refuted by the media. In fact, the media is covered extensively on our website as well. That's something we feel like we have to push forward because he's going to be out there on every news station over the next week as he's making his millions of dollars and selling his book. People need to know who they're dealing with and who they're hearing this from.
You're absolutely right. The Democrats in 2016 were extremely critical of James Comey. It's 100% true. And I don't dispute that that there are a lot of hypocrites in the Democratic Party who are now embracing him, and in the media too. But take a listen to what then candidate Trump had to say about James Comey in 2016 when Comey reopened the FBI investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails just days before voters went to the polls.
And I have to give the FBI credit. That was so bad what happened originally, and it took guts for Director Comey to make the move that he made in light of the kind of opposition he had where they're trying to protect her. It took a lot of guts.
So it seems to me that when Comey's actions helped Donald Trump and the Republican Party, Comey received praise from Donald Trump and the Republican Party and criticism from the Democrats. And when the opposite happened, the opposite happened. Isn't that hypocritical, not just to the Democrats, but Republicans too?
You know, the president gave James Comey an opportunity. He met with him. And this is something that's true to the president. He had people who were critical of him that he's brought into the administration. He had 3 meetings. That's it with James Comey, 3 in-person meetings. He spent time with him. He'd heard of his reputation. And as he got to know James Comey and as he worked with him, he concluded that this was not somebody fit for office, and he fired him. I mean, obviously, the president came to a different conclusion once he worked with James Comey. I think this book is salacious. I think when you read it, he discredits himself.
Have you read it?
The very fact, no, I haven't read it, but the excerpts I'm hearing, the very fact that he's saying that he used polling to determine whether he went to the public and disclosed opening an investigation, something that is unprecedented in FBI history. I think that discredits him completely. It's partisan, that he made a determination that Hillary Clinton was going to win so that he had to take it upon himself to take away any taint from her office as presidency. Some of the descriptions he used are salacious. I think it's worth pointing out that he has a credibility issue, and that's what we're trying to do at the RNC with our website.
All right. RNC Chair Ronna McDaniel, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for taking my questions. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Breaking news outside the courtroom where the government just announced Michael Cohen is under criminal investigation. Stay with us.
Hey, it's Howard Beck, and I've got Kevin Pritchard on Bleacher Report's The Full 48.
They've overachieved wildly, and every single game, sometimes I leave the arena, I go, how did we win that game? But we keep doing it. You know, it's like we played well down the stretch in the last 4 or 5 minutes. We can be a tough team, and we've lost close games, but we win our fair share, too.
So check out The Full 48 now on the Bleacher Report app or subscribe at Apple Podcasts.
And we're back with the politics lead. This image of the president's personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, outside with a group of men smoking cigars in New York as his hearing is ongoing. Cohen has been on the phone a few times, we're told one photographer he would like to send, quote, the great pictures you all have to his mother. We also know that, according to the New York Times, Cohen spoke earlier today with President Trump. We're back with my political panel. One thing that actually is very important in terms of the integrity of the 2018-2020 elections, Comey describes in his book that President Trump and his team were more concerned about the legitimacy of their election in 2016 than they were in the election interference by the Russians that the intelligence chiefs were there in January 2017 to tell them about. What does that tell you about the president and his team?
Well, this has been, to me, always the most concerning issue with this administration is that they have never expressed any interest in trying to find out anything more about what happened, in doing anything to combat it. And so, you know, best case scenario is they're incompetent, and worst case scenario is they don't really want to find out. And so it's always, to me, been very suspicious that they don't they don't direct anybody to look into this. I mean, who in this country is not concerned about this? And here you are in the White House, you're the Attorney General, whoever you are, and this is of no interest to you. And then Comey's saying the same thing, that's not what they want to talk about. They're not interested in it. They're not interested in getting to the bottom of it or preventing it.
Every press secretary gets frustrated with the coverage the media provides. We always cover things that, Robbie, that you don't want us to be covering. Take a listen to White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders today criticizing all of us for covering James Comey's higher loyalty.
You guys spend hours upon hours every single day praising Jim Comey, propping him up, giving him the biggest platform. We shouldn't be praising him. We should be putting him down. We should be taking him off of air.
We shouldn't be praising him. We should be putting him down, says the spokesman for the most powerful nation on earth.
This is classic Trump, both in terms of there is always a filter, which is what is best for him, what's going to make him look good, how does it affect him. It's not, he has no reverence for the office that I think I would argue probably every other president has had. But this is also an example. She was playing for her boss. I'm sure he is watching her every second she's on. That was her speaking directly to him. We see people do that here on the set. We see people do that on Fox News, certainly. That's what's going on. And, it'll just be interesting to see at what point Republicans finally say enough is enough. I feel like things have just changed even within the last 24 hours. This tornado is swirling faster and faster by the hour. Maybe it'll happen after the midterm elections. Republicans lose a lot of seats, but boy, it's feeling like it's going to get stormy, no pun intended.
Well, what's befuddling, or maybe not befuddling, but you say, the lens is, well, what's good for Donald Trump? What's good for Donald Trump is not Donald Trump giving more oxygen to this book.
It's incredible.
Not tweeting out and picking this fight. Fine, let your surrogates go out and do your, get into fisticuffs with Comey and fight it out. Fine, but as the president, taking the step to tweet about this book, you are giving it a platform, and that is something that I just think is beyond befuddling, and if I was an advisor, would frustrate me deeply.
And in fact, the publisher printing 850,000 copies to meet expected demand. Michael Wolff's Fire and Fury, the initial run was 150,000, ended up selling quite a few copies. You're not the only one that has criticized James Comey, and neither are you. Obviously, you knew that because there are two of you next to each other. Let's take a listen to Fox News' Chris Wallace talking about the book.
The other thing that surprises me, frankly, is how bitchy the book is. I think one could argue that by getting into the kind of political food fight, that James Comey has done more damage to his own reputation than he has to President Trump's.
Now, to be fair to the book, there is a lot in here about his life, about prosecuting the mob, about leadership, about, if you follow him on Instagram or Twitter, the kind of emo prose that he favors. But he does go there about the president's skin and the president's hands and the president's hair. Was that a mistake?
Yeah, it was definitely a mistake. And look, it's always, I know I deal with it. I'm sure a lot of other people in the public eye deal with it. You just have that really funny little dig that you want to do on Twitter, you want to put in your column. Don't do it. It always undermines your argument. And it's the laziest way of writing. It's the laziest way of arguing. If you have something to say it. And it's a lot harder to write a good book or a good column in a persuasive way without making fun of somebody or ridiculing them. And so I do think it undermines them.
It is. We are in the Twitter era. Get that little snarky tweet in. Stick around, everyone. The Republican National Committee says that Comey is a liar. They have a website, lioncomey.com. Inside the strategy to attack the fired FBI director's new book. That's next.
From executive producer Jordan Peele, Tracy Morgan is back.
What?
In a new TBS series that the New York Times calls a gritty, funny comedy.
I just did 15 years in prison. What happened to Brooklyn?
Starring Tiffany Haddish.
You gonna bust in there like the Kool-Aid man.
And Cedric the Entertainer.
You thought she was just gonna wait for you? She just got lost. She got lost on another man's bouncy house.
Don't miss Tracy Morgan's return to TV.
Second chances are a beautiful thing.
The Last OG. Tuesdays, 10:30, 9:30 Central. Only on TBS.
We're back with the politics lead. You're looking there at some recent images of Michael Cohen from just a few minutes ago, sitting outside his hotel, hanging out, not a care in the world, even though he's under criminal investigation. CNN has confirmed that President Trump called his personal attorney, Michael Cohen, today, as CNN producers caught up with Cohen outside the hotel. He wouldn't answer any hard-hitting questions. He did say he came out to enjoy the fresh air. Cohen was seen talking on the phone, as you see there. He seemed relaxed, nonchalant. My panel is here with me.
It's kind of like when your boyfriend breaks up with you and then you put pictures on Instagram, like looking really happy, like having champagne.
Nice.
You know what I mean? Yeah. I've never done that, actually. But
But you've read. You've read. Not a care in the world. Kind of like an Instagram image. Robbie, I know you're not a fan of President Trump, but what would your advice be to him? This book hasn't even dropped yet, and he's already tweeting about it. The RNC is all over it. The White House is talking about it from the podium. Is that the right strategy? Just destroy Comey's credibility as much as possible?
So the last time I checked, we're potentially going into a trade war, potentially a hot war situation in the Middle East, the nuclear crisis in the Pacific. Maybe focus on those things and being a president and doing things that he is paid to do as president rather than focusing on the book.
Do you agree?
Consistently, when I talk to voters in focus groups, base Republican voters who like the president, this type of behavior is the one thing they say they wish he would knock off. I hope he takes that message.
They don't, but that's never going to change, though, because
It won't make them not vote for him,
Mm-hmm.
but it's the one thing where if they say, well, we're taking points off, it's that they wish he would stop behaving like a reality show host, and they wish he'd stop behaving like candidate Trump and be presidential.
What about the swing voters? Does it bother them enough?
I think for swing voters, they just feel like everything seems so chaotic and awful, and they're not convinced that a Democratic Congress makes that any better, but they just feel like everything is a mess.
All right, everyone stick around. It's Friday the 13th. What might else happen? We have a few more minutes. Stay with us.